Okay, we'll kick off the webinar now. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining the Safer Workspace Return Recovery Plan webinar. Before we start, there's just a couple of housekeeping points to raise, which are on the screen. For viewing Zoom webinars, it's best if it's in side-by-side mode, and that way, hopefully, you can see both my presentation and the speakers. We are using the Q&A function on this call, so if you have questions during the presentation, please do put them into the Q&A function, and there's also opportunity for other listeners to comment or vote on the questions that go in the Q&A chat, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where we'll go through some or all of the questions that have come in. And the last point there is that this is being recorded. So just to introduce the speakers today, I'm Matthew Cooper, one of the directors here at Woodhouse, and joined by Vernon, one of our project directors, who will be taking us through some of the detail of our recovery plan. And we're hoping this will be wrapped up in about 30 minutes. So we've had the government's guidance on the 11th of May for how we should rework our workplace to make it COVID safe. And we ran a webinar last month where we looked at some of the key challenges in doing this and the challenges that face us as employers and managers of workplaces. And we delivered what we called our 12-point plan, which was 12 practical solutions and services which can be implemented to make a space safer. The purpose of today's webinar is to look in a bit more detail at the key areas that are set out in the government guidance in their document that they've released as we slowly come out of lockdown, and what the challenges they are present to us as managers of workplaces. So the key areas within the government guidance, which no doubt a number on the call are well acquainted with, there was risk assessment, social distancing, managing customers, visitors and contractors, cleaning the workplace, PPE, workforce management, and the management of goods in and out. So what's become clear is that we aren't just simply going back to normal. And it's important that we as organisations follow this guidance now in preparing a safer workplace return. We have a duty of care towards our staff and any visitors that come to our workplaces, and there will be consequences if sufficient preparation is not done, and indeed penalties could be imposed. So very high on the agenda of no doubt every organisation in the across the globe right now. The corporate mindset has changed, and I think we all realise that just having a few bottles of hand sanitizer dotted around the workplace is not enough. Is not the solution that we need, but what we do need is an end-to-end holistic safer workspace return solution. So this is the what we presented in our last webinar, the challenges that face businesses in preparing for a safer workspace return. And just take a moment to remind ourselves of some of these challenges. For example, visitors. How do we manage those that are coming to the workplace? Do we provide PPE? Have we given sufficient guidance in terms of signage so that people know where to go? How have we managed the social distancing? Have we put measures into place to ensure that people are kept alert about the need to keep distance, and have we made sufficient changes to the setup and the furniture so that people can't get too close. There's a number of procedures that we'll need to put into place. It could be around hygiene and what users need to do to maintain hygiene. How do we communicate with our people and keep them alert? Travel to and from work is a very big topic, no doubt being thought about by a lot on the call. Who do we bring back first? Do we focus on those that don't use public transport so that the risk is minimal? Do we have suitable places to park bikes and other transport means? If you're out of town like we are, you may have plenty of parking on site, so it may not be such a challenge. So there's a lot to be thought through. And in order to overcome or help overcome these challenges, there's a need to create a holistic recovery plan. And we're talking about what we can do today for going back to work tomorrow. And having implemented a safer workspace for tomorrow, there'll no doubt be a review and analysis done, re-evaluation done over the coming weeks and months as to how you're going to work going forward. What's your longer term strategy? And we'll touch on that again at the end of this webinar. But the webinar today is focusing on what we can do today for going back to work tomorrow. So I'll now hand over to Vernon, who will take us through what a safer workspace recovery plan could look like. Thank you, Vernon.
Thanks, Matthew. So in the screen you should be able to see in front of you now, we've created a visual of what we believe captures most of the typical environments that our offices would see, with a variety of desking, meeting rooms and washrooms reception. So I'm hoping that out this call today, you'll be able to all take something away. So the space we have in front of us is how our offices look today. And on the right hand side there, we have listed out the 7 points that Matthew's already mentioned, which have been given by the government as guidelines. And our intention is to help you cover off each one of those. First and foremost, we would re-emphasise the need of an employer to carry out a thorough risk assessment and mitigation. There's a lot of responsibility. I'd like to reinforce that. There's a lot of responsibility on employers to create these safer spaces for our employees. So we just move forward to the new space. So here we've taken the same space and giving it very high level, must say simple techniques in the way that we can address these issues, address the needs of this guidance to get us back into work tomorrow. And as we go forward through these slides, we'll zoom into each of these areas and point out a bit more specifically how these arrangements can be made. So starting off with the entrance into the workspace, with the reception area, immediately we're coming into contact with a number of doors. Now these can be managed in various ways. The icon we've got demonstrated there is a silver iron push plates, which the virus sits on for a very short space of time. The doors could be on hold opens and still activated by fire. Hand wash stations, they, as we know, first form of defence Freestanding can be placed at every entry point and throughout the office if there's larger floor plates. Signage, having to have a bit of a fresh take on signage. Personally, and I think generally the industry is, I think we're looking for more of it rather than less of it now. So what better place than a reception to set out the protocols for the workspace that we're entering. And for protection for the receptionist, number of options for screening, perspex screening, bespoke screening, you can match in with your bespoke desks, etc. So moving through to the washroom areas, maybe something as simple as an indicator with a presence detection, so we know how many, or if the toilets are occupied or not, various different ways that can be managed. Into the actual cubicles themselves, disposable seat covers, reduce contact at that point, number of touch-free options throughout the space, toilet sensor flushing, and then we can even move on to a couple of door systems out there now where the cubicle doors can even be touch-free. That seems to be the last remaining item in there not able to be. Down by the vanity area, touch-free soap dispensers, touch-free taps, touch-free drying solutions, can be touch-free towel dispensers, touch-free hand dryers, touch-free bins. Washroom is a great opportunity to move into a touch-free environment and really put the hygienic levels at another level in this area. Moving into the main office area, just inside the reception door there, we've got a PPE station, either for visitors or for staff, maybe some individual packs, maybe some general stocks of PPE to give people comfort and assurance that they're safe as they move through the space. Privacy screening, we've split this up a bit in the throughout the space, so you can see the way we're managing the open plan desks at the bottom 3 banks on this image. Banks of 8, you can see the seats are staggered there. We've got high perspex screens in between the desks, in front of each person and beside each person. Then also the seating is alternated. This can either be kept like this, or the other benches, some companies are working on a rotation basis, so the alternative staff come in and sit at the alternate desks on other days. And if we move to the top section of the benching up there, we've shown it as fully occupied. So we've got, there again, we've got desking and screens in front of each person and beside each person, but the screens between people comes much further back and down, so the people sitting side by side feel more secure. Although within government guidelines, side by side seating is strictly, I think, regarded as okay. We think people may not feel comfortable with doing that, so there's additional screening there. The occupancy levels are required to get that high. And then lastly, I'll just point out the screening to the end of the bench desk too, to protect personnel from people walking past. Another solution for door handles, plenty of door handles throughout the space in meeting rooms. This one is a copper wrap, which may be slightly more elegant looking, and there again is proven to be good at not holding the virus on it. Signage solutions throughout the space can be in the form of stickers on tables, stickers on floors, directional signage. Some people are implementing one-way traffic management throughout the office to minimise on meeting people face to face. These can also be in the format of a carpet tile, a printed carpet tile, which obviously gives you a much longer lasting solution. And then the sanitizing stations, showing this one here just by the entrance to the office, but those of you with larger floor plates will well know that's quite a long way away, and you may want to have these stationed around. These are completely freestanding, and they maybe want to be stationed sort of various locations so people have the comfort of being able to sanitize as and when they feel necessary. And personal space. Everyone has a certain amount of personal belongings when coming to the office, and they can each have a personal locker, very simply retrofitted, and they can have touch-free unlocking facility. Gives people the opportunity to feel like they've got their own space where they keep their own things safe and clean. Meeting rooms are very high contact areas, typically a lot of surfaces people are coming into touch with, and relatively close proximity for maybe sometime a good length of time. Image shown there is of a sanitizing spray, which is a great solution for just grabbing, spraying at the table, spraying the chairs, spraying any surfaces that people might come in contact with before, during, after the meeting. Doesn't leave a residue and gives people comfort that they're safe. There are again more options for signage, giving people instructions so there's no doubt about where they stand and what they is expected of them when they enter the meeting room. Signage, as you can see there, the red and green dots on the table telling people where to sit, where not to sit, how many people should be in that meeting room. And then we're just flagging again the signage on the floor and pointing people in the right direction and giving them necessary guide. Yes, so just there's a further image now of this, the in use and not in use signage that can be applied to desks. So T points and breakout areas. Another example of an entry point where we would recommend a sanitization station, and some people may even add in a hand wash station here so that people aren't tempted to wash their hands in the kitchen sink and they're completely sanitized before entering this space. They would really emphasize here that there's a lot of discussion around how these spaces should be managed in T points and whether we do or don't have food provided, whether people bring pre-packed food, whether we say no to food altogether, whether we limit the amount of people that go into the space. And I think strongly recommend that as employers we put a protocol into place that is clearly communicated to the team. There again, demonstration of the way signage can work on the floor, queuing for getting coffees, directional signage, so there's an in and out for the space, and where to sit and where not to sit. And just breaking up there's another use for the screening products where we have booths. They can either be sideways across the booth like that, or lengthways, depending how you want to split them up. But there again, we can have signage on the end of those booths demonstrating that they're for two only and where to sit and where not to sit. So just moving then on to some items that are a bit more not quite so practical or physical, but nevertheless need to be thought about to follow up on those 7 points that I mentioned at the beginning. Safe management of inbound and outbound goods is an interesting one, and I think that very varies for every organisation. The aim is to minimise contact points and surface transfer of the virus. So I think we need to give that some serious thought and some protocols, whether it be people just leaving parcels in a set location, secure location, where we have to come in contact with them. Building entry systems could also help serve this. So there's various contactless options out there with automated doors, Bluetooth technology, that enables touch-free entry and even loitering. So if the delivery driver turns up, he stands within the camera range for a certain amount of time, it alerts the receptionist. So something we need to give some serious thought to there as the entry to the building. And workplace refresh. We may, some of our spaces may be rather tired, and we want to give our staff confidence that the place is clean, is hygienic, and maybe something as simple as changing out the ceiling tiles, changing the carpet, giving some new LED lighting that will just brighten the space up, freshen, give our employees confidence that this is a safe space. And ventilation and room purification is becoming a very important factor. A number of buildings are still managed on a fresh air via opening windows policy, and there may be a need to either review the mechanical ventilation we have, ensure that recirculation measures are turned off, ensure that some form of validation to make sure that our air conditioning is actually providing the amount of fresh air it should. Maybe we've got some smaller rooms where we think we're not getting enough fresh air, and we can wheel in these room purification systems, which will help purify the air we have got in that space as a standalone item. And obviously deep cleaning prior to moving in. And then interesting emphasis has been coming back onto plants, and as we probably all know, plants has been a growing requirement over the last couple of years, and it's taken a fresh push just recently in the benefits of the oxygen that the biophilia provides. So it's also something worth giving some consideration. So with that, I would hand back to Matthew to help you with Beyond.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fern. That's very helpful, and glad to hear that the plants are still growing. Enjoyed your little pun there. Thank you.
Unintended.
So far we've been talking about a safer workspace recovery plan and how it could look in practice on a fictional floor plan. But as I alluded to earlier, that there will be a requirement beyond this safer workspace return, which is concentrating on how do we get back to the office tomorrow. So the beyond, organisations will be wanting to create the sort of optimum workspace going forward, with the new ways of working and what that will look like in the future. Having spent sort of years trying to refine the optimum number of people that we can fit into a workspace and refining our interior design, we found that a lot of this has been thrown in the air over the last few weeks. And as we settle down to the new future, you and other organisations no doubt will be thinking about, well, how does this impact what our property footprint looks like? So various questions will no doubt be asked. What's the role of the office? How many people will we have at the office at any one time? How do we incorporate a sensible working from home strategy with having an office as well? And this will no doubt differ from organisation to organisation and depend on the demographics of the people you have working for you and the location of your premises and lots of different factors. But we're running another webinar next month where we will dive a bit deeper into this subject of optimizing your workspace for the new ways of working and how to do that and how to implement a transition to a new aligned workspace. So please look out for the invite for that webinar, and we look forward to talking about the Beyond again. So for now, let's have a quick look. There's a couple of questions that have come in on the Q&A. So thank you to those who have put them in. The first one is a question, I'll read it out for clarity. Is there a solution in here for coats, umbrellas that typically go with the weather we face? Well, the weather's been pretty good lately, and we haven't needed it too much, but you're absolutely right. Typically we do face the requirement for a coat and an umbrella. Again, there will be differing situations. If you have a workspace where you have a desk allocated to an individual and a chair allocated to an individual, and you're bringing people on a rotation basis to manage that social distancing, there are chairs that have coat hooks on the back of the chairs, quite simply, that you can leave your coat on the back of the chair. My own opinion is I don't see anything wrong with having an umbrella bin or an umbrella stand. If you put your umbrella in that stand and you take your umbrella out again, it's not a question of sharing, then I can't see anything wrong with that. Vern, did you have anything you could add on that question?
No, I think you've pretty much covered what I would have said. Coat covers is going to be a challenge, and it's a very valid, interesting question that I think we probably need to take away and give a bit more thought, to be honest. If we are going to be having the sharing desk situation, although I think that we may well see a decline in that happening anyway. It's going to be, I think things may well be more of a personal space, at least initially anyway. But it's a good question.
That's a good point, Vern, and we'll be sending out an email to follow up this with a recording of the webinar, so we can pick up on a few of these questions and give some further answers to them. Moving on to the next question here: how do I undertake a risk assessment? Are there accredited third parties that provide this service? And the answer is yes. There are accredited people to provide risk assessments. It doesn't need to be or I'm not aware of assessors that are specific COVID-19 risk assessment assessors, but anyone that is accredited with the HSE or ACAS can provide advice and do a risk assessment. There are templates available. The HSE website has a risk assessment template and lots of other helpful guidance, and I would highly recommend that you check out that website. If you don't have a partner who, or a third party company who you've worked with in the past for carrying out risk assessments, then we can provide some recommendations there. We've had a question in from Jane. Thank you, Jane. With hand sanitization stations for hand washing dotted throughout the workspace, what drying method would you recommend? Can't have loud dryers in the office, for example. Good question, Vern. Could you take that one?
There's a bit of a thinking around. Some people are raising the challenge as to hand dryers potentially blowing things around anyway. So there is a bit of a tendency to move towards touch-free towel dispensers in relation to the and hand sanitizing stations as well, all touch-free. So that will take away from the noise aspect.
And yeah, that's helpful, Ben. And the product that we have been specifying in Workspaces, the portable hand wash station, does have a bin, doesn't it, built in, so that a paper towel can be used to dry your hands and left in the bin.
I appreciate that. That does in turn mean an additional management piece to ensure that is maintained and emptied regularly, of course.
Certainly. The next question here is from Paul. Thank you, Paul. Interesting points on the metal suggestions for handles. Are there any other substrates or materials that have good repelling characteristics? Vern, could you?
Yeah, so stepping on that one, silver is the best, and the silver iron coating is the best. Copper has its own property, and then obviously down from that, there's the copper alloys. So, take brass for instance, is also another option if you want to go something a bit more aesthetically pleasing. But as I say, that's in order of how long the virus sits on it, of which silver is the best. But comes with the price tag on the silver as well, unfortunately.
Thank you, Vernon. Next question from Kevin. Any thoughts on UV and misting type deep cleaning systems? Yes. So there are various options on the market. Our recommendation is that if you have had if you have had a person within your workplace that has symptoms of COVID-19 or even has it confirmed that they have COVID-19, that you would be recommended to use the UV cleaning system, which is a medically used product and highly effective and fast at killing off any contamination. So that's great if you've had a confirmed case. If you haven't had a case, then it can obviously still be done, but it's not cheap and would perhaps be a little bit OTT. Of course, if your workspace has been empty for the last 6, 8, 10 weeks, then it's unlikely to have any contamination in it left. Anyhow, Vern, did you want to add anything to that question?
No, I think that's clear what you've said. It is a highly professional piece of equipment and is hired out with the professionals that carried it out. Because obviously UV is dangerous to personnel. So
yes,
it's a one-off piece of work, but it is very, very effective, and issues report out the end of it as well of exactly what is covered, and takes away from the risk of bad cleaning practices that may just move things around rather than actually cleaning them up.
Thank you. I'm just scanning through. We've got quite a few questions coming in. We'll perhaps just keep going for a couple of minutes. Then the next one here is food or no food, best practice. Vern, I think you picked up a bit on this one in your presentation.
Yes, I think I sort of caveated it with a lot. It is a discussion point. What is best practice? I don't think there's any guidelines around it at the moment that I'm prepared to put hand on heart on. I think obviously pre-packed food. If we must have food in the office, I think pre-packed food is going to be the safest. But then it depends on when that was last touched. We need to be aware of the surface transfer as well. So all these elements need to be taken into consideration, case by case. So it's not really a definitive answer on that one.
Thank you. We have another question here about, is kitchen towel considered touch-free, or would this need to be on some sort of dispenser? Just quite practically, if you have to hold the roll to tear off a piece, then it's not touch-free, and would recommend that you do get a dispenser. within our own T point here, we have paper towels that you would find in a washroom in a nice stainless steel dispenser, rather than having a roll of paper towel like you'd have in your domestic setting, and works well.
Just scanning down, Matthew, I think if we just jump, I think Alan has got a good point about pinch points and staircases.
Certainly, go ahead, Van.
Much want to jump to, because that probably applies to a lot of people. Where there are pinch points in a building, such as stairs where you can't maintain 2 meters, what are your comments on people passing if you can't make one way? A very, very good point. It isn't a nice situation to be had, but I'm aware that it is a very common one. I don't know whether there's rights or wrongs on it, but my feeling would be that the contact point as passing someone is so minimal that I think we'd have to regard it as okay. I think we would be having to ensure that people do have suitable PPE before they get to that point, or provided previously. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that, Matthew.
Yeah, I think it's about being as practical as possible, isn't it, to mitigate the risk. And if that risk can't be mitigated, well, there's not much you can do, is there? If you have a lot of people going through that pinch point, that maybe there's things that could be done where you have a wait at the bottom or a wait at the top until the other person has gone past, or if there's more people than that, or that can't be done, you could encourage people to wear some element of PPE. But I think the point of the guidance is you do a risk assessment and you do what you can to mitigate that risk.
Obviously, with probably slightly less traffic than normal, will also help on that.
Yeah.
Also thinking about the points about side-by-side working actually being regarded by, in the government guidelines, as acceptable if necessary. We'll probably come into that. People may not feel necessarily comfortable with passing people on the stairs, but I don't think it would be a breach of the guidelines. But I think that's something that we need to just do a bit of research on. Good question.
Yeah, thank you, Van. And thank you to all those that have submitted questions. We're at sort of 10 minutes over time. And to avoid keeping you all on for another 15 or 20, while we go through these questions, we will send around an email shortly with answers to these questions that have been answered and the ones that haven't been answered too. Thank you very much all for joining today's webinar. I trust you found it of use and of interest. We will send around a recording of this webinar and a link to the slides with a response on these questions. And also, we'll also be publishing the registration link for the third webinar over the next few weeks. So we're glad if you'd all attend. And within the email, which you'll receive shortly, we are offering a video conference call with anyone that would like to take up the offer, where we can look at your situation specifically and offer any suggestions or advice to your own situation. So thank you all again for joining. Thank you, Vern, for your support, and we look forward to seeing you all again on the next webinar. Have a good afternoon.
Good, thank you.